Let me just share with you that today we're going to be talking about a couple different NFPA codes and standards. And in that regard, one of the documents we'll be talking about is NFPA 101. Up until the 2012 edition, I was actually one of the ASHE reps on the healthcare committee. I now sit on it as a special expert, and I chair the correlating committee. And then another document we'll be talking about this afternoon, NFPA 25, I happen to chair that as well. And that's enough in addition to what you've already heard. Lennon, anything you want to add to your bio that's been?
Yes, I'm Lennon Peak. I've been in the industry for 12 years. I've been working for Mr. Koffel for 11. I had a slight career misstep there before I got together with Mr. Koffel. And I'm very active in a lot of the local chapters of ASHE.
Okay, very good. So, this is a unique session. We're not sitting here, standing here with any type of presentation that we are presenting to you. Instead, we have a bunch of questions for you. Anybody want some polling devices here? Anybody not have one? They're anonymous. Don't worry about it. We're still programming some more. So as we get them programmed, we'll ask and you can put your hands up. One rule, please do not leave this room with that clicker. I'd love to tell you it will explode with purple ink when you leave. It won't, but I wish you had that threat. Please, if you need to leave early for any reason, please make sure that we get that clicker back. The handouts are not on the website yet. Why? Because you'd study for this. We didn't want you to study for this. We're giving you an opportunity to answer these questions. They will be posted after the site, or after this session. They will be up on the website. The questions that we got, basically from the experience that Lennon and I have had as Just Ask ASHE participants, things we've learned in the field, questions we get asked during the survey process or post-survey process, things that we've seen on the ASHE listserv. So that's a source of a number of the questions we're going to have. As you answer the questions, answer them based upon the NFPA code or standard, not based upon maybe some interpretation you've heard or maybe some modification that your state has to that particular requirement. Today we're discussing what the NFPA code or standard, how it addresses it. And we hope to have some fun this afternoon. Again, this will kind of be a unique session. So I think, Tim, you have some more ready? So people that need polling devices, please raise your hand. We'll bring some more around. So, Lennon, you want to go over the documents we'll be talking about?
Yes, today we're going to be going over several NFPA documents. However, we are going to focus on NFPA 101. You'll see the slide does reference the 2000 edition. We are only going to be asking questions about the 2012 edition. We wanted this to be a looking forward presentation. All of the other codes and standards you see underneath are reference documents out of the 2012 Life Safety Code, NFPA 10 on fire extinguishers, 25 on inspection, testing, and maintenance of water-based fire protection systems, 72 for fire alarm, 80 for fire doors, and 99 for the healthcare facilities codes. We'll have at least one question from each.
Okay, so what will happen is a question's going to come up on the slide. There are either 2 or 3 choices to answer the question. If you look at your clicker, you see on the top row there's an A, a B, and a C. So there's a 1, 2, and 3 also. But if you see an A or B or C, that is the response that you should click based upon what you think is the correct answer to the question. Now, if we look, and what's going to happen is the results are going to be posted very quickly. And if we look up there and we see that 80% of you got this right, then there's probably no reason for us to go on with any detailed explanation. We've done this session, similar session to this at PDC in San Antonio. And as I started the session, I almost made the mistake and said, we're going to start with a real easy question. Because the first question up there, I think the split was 33, 33, 33. So it wasn't maybe quite as simple as I thought it was. So I'm not going to say that comment here. We did, however, put a test question up for you. so that you did get a feel for what this clicker and how this whole system is going to operate. So, here is your test question. And you see, I can see a little count down there, and as I see the count start to slow down, I'll assume we have most of the responses that we're going to get. And then I will advance here. Wow, we have a lot of Indianapolis fans here. Where's Nehi? Come on. All right, so that's what will happen, and we'll then have a chance to talk about the answer to the question. So let's get serious and let's go visit the Life Safety Code. Go ahead and answer. Okay, Lennon, you want to tell us what the answer is?
I do. The answer is A, a door to an exit access corridor.
Now, here's an interesting side tip to this particular question. I know that somebody sent an advisory service question to NFPA. And NFPA gave an answer of C. And now this was based on the 2012 code, and that was then sent to me, and I said, I'm not quite sure that's correct. And we got into an email exchange with the person at NFPA, and they said we will send up a follow-up to say that it is truly A. Now, here's the twist. If you look in the 2012 edition of the code, it's really not that clear. However, in the 2015 edition of the code, the committee made an editorial clarification to say that we really mean that it goes to the exit access door to the corridor. The intent being that if there's something going on in that suite, you're probably not moving patients down the stair quickly. But you will move them out into the corridor or cross an exit access door, maybe to another suite or something like that. We didn't give you that as an option. We merely said a door to the corridor. Okay, there's the answer. All right, next question. Okay, we're just about done. Any last minute responses? And the answer is Lennon? Whoops, there's a split we had.
The answer is B.
Suites are separated by corridor wall requirements. Now, some people, and Lennon did a presentation on Monday, some people might confuse that with smoke partition. Although the Life Safety Code doesn't require the corridor to be a smoke partition, it does say it is capable of resisting the passage of smoke. The I codes would call that a smoke partition, but the separation requirement really is a corridor wall requirement. Anything you want to add to that, Lennon?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the suite is thought of as one large room, so it's just separated the same as a normal room is from the corridor. So it's just one large room with a separation from the corridor. It's thought of like that. So that's the corridor wall separation. And the smoke barriers are designed for, that's your maximum 22,500 square feet. And you could have more than one suite within a smoke barrier.
And remember, the Life Safety Code has no requirement for your room-to-room separation. And so while Lennon said it's thought of as a room, we do allow you to egress from suite to suite, so the committee wanted the boundary of the suite to be a corridor wall. Okay, moving on. Remember, this is 2012 edition of the code. All right, looks like we're about hitting our total here. So we have an existing suite. It's not protected with a sprinkler system, but does have a smoke detection system in the suite. So the answer is, Lennon? What is the answer?
The answer is A.
So there is credit you get for smoke detection, but you have to start out with a sprinkler protection. And then depending upon the type of sprinklers you have, and then if you have smoke detection, you can potentially get up to 10,000 square feet. But the code doesn't give you any increase just for the presence of smoke detection. You can use it to offset the visual observation, but not for an increase in area. Okay, any questions so far? Everybody comfortable? You're quiet. You're not having enough fun yet. All right, let's see what's going to happen now.
We got a question back here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, very good point. So let me just offer, we actually did not include IBC questions in this particular program. We did it to PDC. And one of the reasons for that is that we're trying to focus maybe a little bit more on existing buildings and what you might have to be maybe maintaining as the conditions in your existing building. However, even in the IBC, it is still not a smoke barrier. It is a smoke partition. And the IBC does say that the smoke partition needs to be continuous to the underside of this, to the floor slab above, unless the ceiling is capable of resisting the passage of smoke. Here's the interpretation difference. NFPA says laying acoustical tiles capable of resisting the passage of smoke. IBC says no, it's not. And you're not going to find that in the code. You will find it in the commentary. And you will also see it in the code action activity for the 2015 edition of the code, because the ASHE advocacy effort tried to get that revised to say that it could stop at the underside of a suspended ceiling system. And for new construction, the ICC said no. Existing buildings, you can. Existing conditions, you can stop that wall, corridor wall at the underside of it, lay an acoustical tile ceiling system. So, good point. All right, let's see. We did suite size, right?
Yep.
Yep, okay. So, next one. All right, we're getting close to that magical number. Any last minute answers? And the answer is, tell them they all got it right. Oh, maybe they didn't all get it right. Go ahead, Lennon.
Oh, yes, the answer is C.
So what's A? Sleeping suite. Okay. Non-sleeping suite, 25, or non-sleeping room, 2,500 square foot. Okay, and again, you will get these handouts, so you will have the opportunity to look at all these answers in the code. We've given you the particular paragraph numbers. Okay, so now I'm told I need 2 ways out. Okay, so there's a little trick in this one, wasn't there? What's the key word? New. So the answer is B. Why? Because if you have sprinkler protection, you can change that half diagonal rule to 1/3. And since new healthcare has to be sprinklered, we don't need to be talking about half the diagonal in our healthcare occupancies. We can be dealing with 1/3. Where does the 1/4 come from? Certain editions of the IBC. So while we're not talking about the IBC, yes, we've included some IBC answers in here as distractors. They like that word, distractor. Okay. We ready for the next one then? All right. So. And the answer should have been, Lennon?
The answer was B, 48 inches. Because since this was, first off, it's existing, and existing exit access corridors are allowed to be down to 48 inches. Now, that does not mean if your corridor is currently wider than 48 inches, you can make it more narrow, because new construction would require the 8 feet. And the distractor on the answer A is that in adjunct areas that are not used for patient egress, it is allowed to go down to 44 inches.
But Lennon, you just told me that in a new building, it's 8 feet, existing is 4 feet. So if I have an existing hospital, I can go ahead and reduce that corridor, right?
You cannot reduce your corridor below what is required for new. If you had a 10-foot corridor, you could reduce it down to 8 feet, but you can't reduce the corridor down to anything less than what's required for new.
So in other words, whatever this magical date is that we're going to get from CMS and Joint Commission, everything after that date is new. Everything before that will be existing, but it's an existing condition. So even though what might be a new building today under the 2000 code becomes an existing building whenever we go to the 2012, doesn't mean you can start reducing your corridor sizes by putting furniture in there or something else other than the furniture provisions that are in the 2012 code. Okay. And Lennon, the answer is?
C. Now, I will add to this that just if you are on the ground, or if you're on the first floor of your building that has exits that discharge directly to the outside, that exit to the outside does not count in place of meeting this requirement of 200 feet to reach the smoke compartment door. Because just think about inclement weather conditions, you are not providing the patients the same amount of care if they have to go outside, even if there's a fire in the building, as opposed to keeping them inside across the smoke barrier.
So again, just like our suite provision, the suite you measure to an exit access door to the corridor, or you can do it to a horizontal exit door under the 2012 code. The smoke barrier travel distance is measured to the smoke barrier door. You could have a stairway in that smoke compartment that's far less than 200 feet. You're still going to measure 200 feet to the smoke barrier door. Does anybody know where that 200 feet came from? Anybody? Well, here's what, if you think back to older editions of the code, or if you look in Chapter 19, you'll see that the smoke barrier compartment size, an option for existing buildings, is 150 feet by 150 feet. And the committee started to get challenged on that, and we decided that the better answer or better code requirement is, how far do we need to move a patient to get them across a smoke barrier? We had a nurse on the committee at the time, and we said, how far do you think it's appropriate for staff to have to move a patient to get them across a smoke barrier? And she said 200 feet. So there you go. That's your clinical staff impacting your code requirements. All right, so 200 feet. Yeah, this is a longer one. It takes a little bit longer to read this one. Let's see how we did. But the answer is
A.
Requires the fast response sprinklers on both sides of the smoke barrier. Okay. Now, question. What's a fully ducted system? Wait, somebody laughed about that. Why'd you laugh about that? That's simple, right? Can I use flex duct? Well, if you're in an IBC state, the answer is going to be no. Fully ducted is rigid metal duct. So this is going to be pretty tough to use. This language, by the way, has been added to the 2015 edition of the IBC to allow you to omit the smoke damper at a smoke barrier if you have fast response sprinklers on both sides of the smoke compartment. That is in the 2015, but it says fully ducted with rigid duct. Under the NFPA code, I'll say maybe subject to the interpretation of the various AHJs that you have to deal with as to whether you can use flex duct or not. I will tell you that ASHI's advocacy team, and this is another reason why some of these are up here, kind of let you know some of the things that ASHI is doing for you. So ASHI's advocacy team has a proposal into the I-code to say that we can use a limited amount of flex duct. Why? Rigid duct is awfully noisy, isn't it? And what's the number one HCAP problem? Noise. So ASHI is hoping to allow us to be able to use flex duct in the future. I'm sorry? Okay, so the question is, how do we define a limited amount of flex duct? Therein lies the basic problem of the proposal. The intent, I believe, of what ASHI's trying to accomplish is that from the duct that runs down your corridor into your individual rooms, that could be flex duct. But we don't want to be running flex duct through the smoke barrier. Okay, now industry is saying, oh, but flex duct will fail, you'll get smoke in the system. You know, if I put rigid duct in there, I could have an air diffuser right next to the smoke barrier, and I'd be there with no damper. So is flex duct that much of a problem? It is to people that are affected by a change in a code requirement. So we'll see what happens in the I-code process. All right. So our highly scientific poll says the answer is B, maybe A. Lennon, you think the answer is?
B.
B, 6 square foot. Now, we put on the slide NFPA 13 and I highlighted it in red, so I made sure I said something about that. The reference standard, sprinkler standard for the 2012 edition of the Life Safety Code is the 2010 edition. So there is an annex note because the code takes, first off, a code takes precedent over the reference standard, but we also have an annex note in the 2012 edition of the code that says, we know we're overriding what is in NFPA 13, but here is why we've done it, and then 13 caught up with us in the 2013 edition. So to my gentleman that is worried about the I-codes, here is another issue. If you have to comply with the 2012 edition of Life Safety Code and the 2012 edition of the I-codes, you're using the 2010 edition of NFPA 13, you might not be able to take advantage of this. Okay, but those of you that have retrofit sprinkler projects, there's a significant cost savings of not having to run sprinklers into the closets. I don't know that there's any reason to take them out if they're already there, but you don't have to add them. So the question is, how do we deal with nurse servers? There is an annex note in the 2012 edition of the Life Safety Code that talks about nurse servers, and sprinklers are not required in the nurse server. It's considered a piece of furniture, just like the cabinet on the wall. You don't have to have a sprinkler inside that cabinet.
One other thing on that question, I just want to stress that it is only in hospitals where you are allowed to omit the sprinkler. It is not healthcare occupancies, so it does not apply to nursing homes or other long-term care facilities that usually would have more combustibles in the closet.
Exactly. This is just like the hotel. Hotels has had this for years. You know, if you're in a hospital, you probably have very little in the closet, so no sprinkler is required. Okay, releasing operations. As a group, we've reached consensus. But Lennon's going to tell us the answer is?
The answer is B, 3 people.
This is a change. This is a significant change in the 2012 edition of the code. As an existing condition, you are now allowed to have 2 releasing operations if there's no more than 3 people in the space. As an existing condition. You don't get to add that deadbolt to that door. Well, let's think about it. They did it right now before CMS adopts the 2012 code. And you don't, no, you're not allowed to add it to the door. But as an existing condition, you can do that. Where did 3 people come from? There's 3 people in your row. You know, there are committee numbers that I can tell you where they come from, and there are committee numbers that, yeah, no, it's a consensus. And there's a couple things in the code where we talk about 3 people for special type of egress devices and so forth.
We have another question over here.
Oh, I'm
Bill.
sorry? Is that a conflict with ADA? Not that I'm aware of, but if your accessibility standard would prohibit that. Now, these cannot be 2 simultaneous actions. Okay, so I don't have to have 2 hands. I do one and then I do the other. No different than your hotel room. You probably need 2 ways out of your hotel room, or 2 releasing operations to get out of your hotel room if you use that night latch. Oh, another question. Yes? Because there's so many people with deadbolts on existing doors. Yeah, but remember, it's not just healthcare. Okay, we were in an office, about 3 offices before the one we're in right now, and there was the latch and there was the deadbolt, and we questioned it, and they said all the counties approved it, and their rationale was, well, you're a business, so if anybody's in there, you're going to have both of those. You're going to have the deadbolt open. I might have bought that for the main door into the office, but they also had the same thing on the second door out, and we never unlatched the second door because that wasn't a observed entry into the office space.
So, my explanation is saying that it's because of the numbers, they decided that it would be safe.
I mean, I wouldn't say that it was solely based upon the fact that we had this many existing conditions, but that's what forced the committee to reevaluate it. I could look at the documentation further, but I really do think it was number of existing conditions with 2 releasing operations. Okay. Alcohol-based hand rub dispensers. Remember, this is the NFPA answer. It's not something you might have gotten from some other organization. And our answer is, we don't know.
A. It's 1 inch in the 2012 Life Safety Code. In previous editions, I think it was 2012 when it was changed to 1 inch. Before that, it was directly adjacent. So that left an interpretable requirement, and then there were different AHJs enforcing different distances. For a while, there was a time where there was an answer where it had to be 12 inches. There were other times when it was 6 inches. So then after we realized this was a problem in the code, there was then Healthcare Interpretation Task Force then looked at it. They gave approval to meet the new 1 inch requirement. So the 2012 actually, the HITF will give you permission to meet 1 inch now today, even though it's in the 2012 code.
Remember, please do not leave with a clicker, so if you're leaving, please leave it. Thank you. Okay. HITF, Healthcare Interpretation Task Force. Okay, that is a group that gets together representing various regulatory and accrediting organizations to try to come up with some consistency when the code is not clear. You can find HITF interpretations on the NFPA website if you want to locate those. They're not necessarily the easiest thing. Actually, I think they are on the 101 Doc Info page now. Have you?
No, I have not.
Yeah,
we do have a document that compiles them all together, though, in one document.
Yeah, I think they are now on the Doc Info page. Yes, sir.
It cannot be located above an ignition source. It has to be at least 1 inch over to the side if it is above. If it's below, it just needs to be 1 inch below, and it's good.
Okay, good question, good clarification. Yes? As far as I know. Yeah, there is no mandate that they have to comply. And the notice of proposed rulemaking, I don't recall that they've modified the 1 inch. So when they go to the 2012 code, I think it's 1 inch. I could check the rulemaking notice, but I don't think they modified that. Yes, sir.
Just came last week, Joint Commission, they're saying 6 inches from the center of the dispenser.
That document or that guidance may be antiquated. There was a period of time that I recall that they were saying 6 inches.
Is it dated? Yeah, 6 inches was a common number. Okay, and what happened is a lot of facilities start that to go through projects of moving the alcohol-based hand rub dispenser or the ignition source, probably the dispenser, and that's when the committee said, let's quantify this a little bit better. Okay, moving on. Just about out of the life safety code, but not quite. Very good. 54% said all of the above. And actually, C is the correct answer. There's special language in the 2012 code, and in the 2015 code, it'll even be more confusing because it'll say 12 years of this, 9 years of that, and 6 years of that. So this mandate originated in the 09 edition of the Life Safety Code, so the committee doesn't want you to continue every time you adopt a newer edition of the code to get another 12 years. All right. I'm sorry?
What high-rise definition is applicable there? Is it the high-rise at the time of construction or high-rise now, i.e. 75 feet? Or
70.
Class 1, 2, and 3 rules if it was built in, let's say, 1964?
No, the definition of high-rise in the Life Safety Code is 75 feet from the level of fire department vehicle access to the floor level of the highest occupied story. So it's not the roof, it's the highest occupied story.
So the building was built prior to that definition coming into place. Would the requirement for sprinkler protection still apply? In other words, if it was under 75 feet, if it was classified as high-rise in the 1960s, under the original 1960s code, would it then have to be sprinklered under that code section?
Not by the Life Safety Code.
So 75 feet is the trigger for that particular.
That is correct. 75 feet is the definition of high-rise in the Life Safety Code and actually in the IBC as well. Now, there is another trigger for sprinklers in the IBC at a lower elevation than 75 feet, but high-rise is defined as 75 feet. Okay, delayed egress. And the answer is
C. Now, you probably remember that there used to be a limitation in the healthcare chapter on the number of delayed egress paths the number of delayed egress devices in an egress path. It used to be one device in healthcare occupancies. I believe in 2009 that limitation was removed from the Life Safety Code. I'm sure Bill knows exactly why that was, but I think that it was just determined that in a fully sprinkler protected building, which you're required to have to use delayed egress, that you had enough protection that if you had to wait another 15 or 30 seconds, that you were still being afforded with an acceptable level of life safety.
Yeah, the committee recognizes the increasing need and the concern with security, and we are trying to address it. You may not think we have done a good enough job or comprehensive enough job, but we are trying to address it as a committee, and we have opened the door for some additional security measures. This one's interesting, though, because people ask me, where in Chapter 18 and 19 does it say I can have more than one? It doesn't. The language was that 18 and 19 used to say you're only allowed to have one. Now it refers me back to Chapter 7, and there's no limit in Chapter 7. So that's where we get to the unlimited. But, again, I pick up the 2012 code, Chapter 18, 19, there's nothing in there that says you're allowed to have two or more, whatever. It just doesn't say anything about a limit anymore. Did I see a hand go up? Yes, sir.
Yes. Was there not an all states letter from CMS indicating the one
An all states letter.
Yes, to enforcement agencies by state, for example, in North Carolina, DHSR.
North Carolina has their own requirement that limits you to 1. That is a state requirement. So that is not, to the best of my knowledge, a CMS requirement when they go under the 2012 code. Okay, they're under the 2000 code, so their requirement right now is 1, unless this is a categorical waiver item, correct? Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, categorical waiver, I can use this new provision.
Lenny, could you rewind a second? I thought I heard you say that delayed egress devices are only allowed in fully sprinkled buildings?
Sprinkler or smoke detection.
Only smoke detection?
Yep, in Chapter 7, you have to have sprinkler protection or smoke detection.
Combination of both as well.
That's IBC. Yep. Okay. Good.
Clarify that to be all occupied spaces, though, so that's...
In terms of the extent of detection? Yeah, it's not. In NFPA 72, there is a definition of total complete smoke detection, which says you put a smoke detector everywhere. You don't have to meet that, but it is smoke detection throughout the space. Okay. Out of 101 now, moving into some other standards. NFPA 10. So you're now ASHI's representative on the 10 committee, right?
Yes, I
All
am.
right, so Lennon's going to get this one right. Very
All right,
good.
A.
Very good. Okay, so we probably don't need to say a whole lot more about that. We had a pretty good response on that. So let's go to NFPA 13. I want the NFPA answer, not a certain regulatory body's answer.
The answer is C.
Now, here's the issue. The language in NFPA 13 doesn't say enclosed space, like I put in this. It says compartment. So NFPA 13 says you cannot mix response characteristics within the compartment. There is a certain organization that is interpreting the word compartment in that context in NFPA 13 as a smoke compartment. NFPA 13 defines compartment, and it says it's a space enclosed by walls and ceilings. So you do not have to replace it throughout the compartment, at least per NFPA 13 requirements. Okay.
So B was correct, too?
I'm sorry?
So B was correct, too?
Not in the smoke compartment. So
Okay,
that's where the difference.
Those that said B, yes, you do not have to. That's correct. Good catch. Sprinklers in the entire smoke compartment required to be replaced? No. Not all of them. Okay, so we got 71% that got that one correct. Very good. There were 2 correct answers. So while you're thinking about the right answer, let me tell you a story. A number of years ago, I was out doing some other work at a hospital in California, and they had just completed a retrofit sprinkler project, and the facility engineer said, "Bill, we've sprinklered throughout. I just want you to see this." And we started walking around the facility and said, "Yeah, your sprinkler system looks real great, but now you need to replace your privacy curtains." So the correct number is?
C, 22 inches.
81% of us didn't get it. You must be wrong, Lennon.
That's because it was a recent change in the code. We're all so used to enforcing the 18-inch limitation below a sprinkler deflector, and that 18 inches was what was in the previous code, and it was changed because actually the basis of the testing that was done at NIST to allow the curtain, they happen to be at 22 inches and not 18 inches.
But
So
it's 22 inches measured from the ceiling.
Right,
So
not
you're
the deflector.
measuring at different dimensions now. Before it was 18 inches beneath the deflector, Now it's 22 inches down from the ceiling. So depending upon the type of sprinkler you have, it may or may not be a change. Okay. Our final answer is
C, there is no minimum distance.
so where did these other numbers come from? In NFPA 13, there's a criteria that if you have a partial obstruction in the upper 18 inches of your distribution pattern, you need to be 3 times C or 3 times D away. And then it says, but you only have to enforce that up to a distance of 24 inches. So it looks like A or B might be right. But then there's another paragraph that says, in light and ordinary hazard, you only need to apply that rule to structural members. So technically, as long as you have the ability to get water around or underneath that sign, there is no minimum separation between the sign. Now, if you got an 8-foot corridor and you got an 8-foot sign going the entire width of the corridor, yes, I'm going to look at that as being an obstruction. But if I have a limited sign, and it was exit signs, he was a sprinkler contractor coming into the committee and said, you know, I put all my sprinklers in and then they put the exit signs in and the fire marshal told us we had to move the sprinklers because they were too close to the exit signs. And the committee said, what's an exit sign or two? So for light and ordinary hazard, which is why we clarified it as a patient care corridor, that's light hazard, there is no minimum distance. It might be good to keep them some distance away, but the standard doesn't have that requirement. And again, we're looking at 2011-25. So the answer is
C, semi-annually.
so what happened is in the 1999 edition of NFPA 72, this was changed from quarterly to semi-annually. But NFPA 101 referenced 25, or at least CMS chose the 25 reference, which was still at quarterly. So that's why historically we had the quarterly test requirement. That's probably why some people had the 49%. The data that was used to change it in 72 was based upon paddle type water flow indicators and pressure switches, not the outside water motor gong. So 25 eventually caught up, and that's why we're at semi-annually. There is a possibility that that might go to annual. There was a vote taken at the NFPA meeting on NFPA 72 because they were proposing now to change it to annual. Or no, it was annual. There was a certified amending motion to take it back to semi-annual. I don't know if anybody will appeal it, but it's possible that newer editions might even take that to an annual test requirement.
And this also is one of the items that you can take advantage of today, even though it's in the 2011 code, as long as you're using the guidelines that CMS has for their categorical waivers.
And if I put my sprinkler hat on for a moment, we probably would prefer you to only do this semi-annually, because every time you do this test, you introduce fresh oxygen into your pipe system, and you're incurring additional corrosion when you do that. So this is not necessarily a thing that's good to do more often than what's required. Yes, sir.
Even though it is in the categorical waiver, there is a conflict with many insurance underwriters who will allow you to concur with the categorical waiver.
Yeah, so Tom's comment, and I'll be mentioning it on, not this one, but there are instances where your insurance carrier may require you to comply with a more restrictive requirement. Okay, so flow test of the standpipe system. So if you're not familiar with the terminology, a manual standpipe system is one that does not have an automatic water supply that meets the standpipe flow requirements. We rely on the fire department to connect to the fire department connection. And we might get distribution on this too because NFPA 25 keeps changing this requirement. I think in 3 editions we had 3 different requirements. And the answer is
A, automatic.
automatic. Part of the concern, now there's a lot of people in the 25 committee that don't agree with this, but part of the concern is if you don't have an automatic water supply, how are you going to test it? You've got to bring in a tanker or some apparatus that can flow that quantity of water at the pressure necessary to test that system. So that's one of the reasons why you have seen, at least in the 2011 edition, this backed off to automatic only. Okay. 2011 fire pumps. And the answer is?
B, monthly.
This is another one, though. To Tom's point, there are a lot of insurance carriers that want this pump run weekly, no matter whether it's a diesel engine or an electric motor. So you do want to check with your insurance carrier. And I will tell you that the 2014 edition has changed this to say it might be monthly, it might be weekly. It depends upon how reliant you are on the fire pump. You know, if I'm in the Middle East and all my water is coming from a tank, I'm very reliant on that fire pump. If I'm here in the city of Boston and my building's not too tall, public water might actually be adequate to supply the sprinkler system. So I'm not as dependent on the fire pump, and therefore we go to monthly. So that's the language that's in the 2014 edition of 25.
That one also is a CMS categorical waiver. You
Thank
can
you.
take advantage of that today if, given that your insurance provider approves.
Okay. When do you have to check your fire pump? After you've done your annual flow test. Okay, the answer is very
C.
good. Okay, nameplate rating or acceptance test. Moving on. But the answer isn't B, is it?
Answer is C.
That is a change. Okay? 4 hours in a 24-hour period of time is what was in the previous editions of 25 and is what was in NFPA 101. But the 2011 edition now says 10 hours. In other words, you can bring a contractor into your building and let them work in your building for a day without having to do impairment procedures. So that's the rationale for the 10 hours. This is one, yes, I believe this is in the notice. We don't know whether CMS will allow it or not. In fact, I had a conference call with Jim Merrill 2 hours ago, and he wouldn't tell me anything about the comments. So, yes, this is something that might be revised in the adoption. Okay. Don't blame Lennon on this one. This one I snuck in here. Because again, I want you to know what you're going to hear from contractors versus what you might be required to do. So the correct answer to this is very dependent upon how you define a sprinkler system. And in the 2011 edition of NFPA 25, which relied on the 2010 edition of NFPA 13, I would argue that this hospital has a single sprinkler system. And NFPA 25 says you need to have every 5 years an internal assessment of the pipe at 2 locations. So that would be 1. But notice I put some question marks because there's a lot of people who don't agree with that interpretation. So in the 2013 edition of 13, sprinkler system is redefined. Every floor of your hospital is at least 1 sprinkler system. So in this 8-story hospital, now I have 8 sprinkler systems, which means I would need to do 4 because 25 says if I have multiple systems in the building, I can do alternate systems within that 5-year period. So that's very good that many of you got the 1. That's what I would say it is under this edition of the standard. All right, I think we're ready. Oh no, one more NFPA 25 question. Not that you ever do construction activities in an existing hospital, but just in case you do. But the answer is
A, system working pressure.
so 20 is the dividing line. If you look in NFPA 25, it tells you what to do with less than 20 sprinklers. It tells you what to do with more than 20 sprinklers. That addition of 25 doesn't tell you what to do if you have exactly 20 sprinklers. It happens. So that's why we put 12, so we were clearly under 20. So system working pressure, just restore the normal working pressure on the system. All right, NFPA 99, wet procedure locations. Probably heard about this in some other program this week. So what is the answer?
C, after a risk assessment.
You all got it right, okay. We'll send a letter to everybody's supervisor saying you got at least one question right. Oh, you didn't get one question wrong. There you go. Back on NFPA 99. The answer is
B, 22,500 square feet.
now.
They're looking ahead to the future, perhaps.
So the 40,000 square foot could be the size of a smoke compartment, depending upon what happens with the next edition of Life Safety Code. 2015 edition of IBC already allows a 40,000 square foot smoke compartment. So I've raised a question to the 99 committee in a public input. What did you really mean by 22.5? The language in 99 says 22.5. Did you mean per smoke compartment? And as Lennon will tell you, this is very difficult to enforce in the field. Does that mean I can draw any 22,500 square foot area I want? And it's 300 cubic feet within that? So it'll be interesting to see what the 99 committee does with that to try to clarify it for the 18 edition of the document. The NFPA 72. And the answer is very good, because actually in seminars at NFPA we tell you that the fire alarm pull stations can be any color as long as it's red. You know what's a more interesting comment on this, however? And I have a brand new hospital that has already had 2 false activations of a clean agent system because they have put in fire alarm pull stations as the manual actuation of the suppression system. And people have pulled the pull station maybe like during a fire drill or something. And they dump a clean agent system. So you might want to be very cautious about that. It's not an uncommon issue. All right, smoke detectors. And the answer is...
All right, very good. C, never.
The test requirement is that you are testing that smoke can enter the chamber. The magnet doesn't test that. The magnet will tell you whether the detector works because the ion flow is different, but it doesn't tell you that smoke will enter that chamber. So you need to introduce smoke or an aerosol or something to demonstrate that smoke will enter the chamber. All right, NFPA 80. And the answer is?
C, when
Very
authorized.
good, very good. So you are allowed to do some field modifications. NFPA 80 will provide some limitations and when you're authorized by the listing laboratory. Okay, if my memory's correct, this might be the last one. All right, and the answer is? Very good.
Yes.
C, a person with the knowledge and understanding of the operating components of the door. You might have had, again, please don't leave with a clicker. There are some people pushing certified door inspectors. They are certainly qualified to do that, but that's not the minimum requirement by the standard. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you had a little fun, and maybe we'll see you at Fenway.